with heaven. In the evening, in the morning, with the second day. God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear, and it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. And from the tree of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, and God bless all of you on this good earth.
Finally, if we are to win the battle that is now going on around the world between freedom and tyranny, the dramatic achievements in space which occurred in recent weeks should have made clear to us all, as did the Sputnik in 1957, the impact of this adventure on the minds of men everywhere who are attempting to make a determination of which road they should take. Since early in my term, our efforts in space have been under review. With the advice of the Vice President, who is Chairman of the National Space Council, we have examined where we are strong and where we are not, where we may succeed and where we may not. Now it is time to take longer strides, time for a great new American enterprise, time for this nation to take a clearly leading role in space achievement, which in many ways may hold the key to our future on Earth. Proud to visit the Federal Republic with your distinguished Chancellor, who for so many years has committed Germany to democracy and freedom and progress, and to come here in the company of my fellow American, General Clay, who has been in this city during its great moments of crisis and will come again if ever needed. Years ago, 2,000 years ago, crowded poet was Civis Romanus Sum. Today, in the world of freedom, the proudest boast is, Ich bin ein Berliner.
Happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. telegraph beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languid in the corners of American society, finds himself in exile in his own land.
Our cause is against fear and not imaginary hurt, or to use the language of the state prosecutor, so-called harshness. Basically, we fight against two features which are the hallmark of African life in South Africa, and which are entrenched by legislation which we seek to have repealed. These features are poverty and lack of human dignity, and we do not need congress or so-called agitators to teach us these things. South Africa is the richest country in Africa, and will be one of the richest countries in the world. But it is a land of extreme and remarkable conduct. Must be fun and joy. What may well be the highest standard of living in the world, while in Africa, see hope and misery. 40% of the Africans live in hopelessly overcrowded and in some cases drought-stricken reserves, where soil erosion and the overworking of the soil make it impossible for them to live properly on the land. 80% labor tense and squat and white farm, and work and live under conditions similar to those of the cells of the Middle Ages.
Perceived through my senses. It transcends the senses, but it is possible to reason out the existence of God to a limited extent. Even in ordinary affairs, we know that people do not know who rules or why and how he rules, and yet they know that there is a power that certainly rules. In my tour last year in Mysore, I met many poor villagers, and I found upon inquiry that they did not know who ruled Mysore. They simply said, some God ruled it. If the knowledge of these poor people was so limited about their ruler, I, who am infinitely lesser in respect to God than they to their ruler, need not be surprised if I do not realize the presence of God, the King of Kings. Nevertheless, I do feel, as the poor villagers felt about my sword, that there is orderliness in the universe. There is an unalterable law governing everything and every being that exists or lives. It is not a blind law, for no blind law can govern the conduct of living beings. And thanks to the marvelous researches of Sir J.C. Bose, it can now be proved that even matter is life. That law, then, which governs all life is God. Law and the lawgiver are one. I may not deny the law or the lawgiver because I know so little about it or him. Just as my denial or ignorance of the existence of an earthly power will avail me nothing, even so my denial of God and His law will not liberate me from its operation.
I thank you in the name of the Mother of Religions, and I thank you in the name of the millions and millions of Hindu people of all classes and sects. My thanks also to some of the speakers on this platform who, referring to the delegates from the Orient, have told you that these men from far-off nations may well claim the honor of bearing to different lands the idea of toleration. I am proud to belong to a religion which has taught the world both tolerance and universal acceptance. We believe not only in universal toleration, but we accept all religions as true. I am proud to belong to a nation which has sheltered the persecuted and the refugees of all religions and all nations of the earth. I am proud to tell you that we have gathered in our bosom the purest remnant of the Israelites who came to southern India and took refuge with us in the very year in which their holy temple was shattered to pieces by Roman tyranny. I am proud to belong to the religion which has sheltered and is still fostering the remnant of the grand Zoroastrian nation. I will quote to you, brethren, a few lines from a hymn which I remember to have repeated from my earliest boyhood, which is every day repeated by millions of human beings. As the different streams having their sources in different places all mingle their water in the sea, so, O Lord, the different paths which men take through different tendencies, various though they appear, crooked or straight, all lead to thee. The present convention, which is one of the most august assemblies ever held, is in itself a vindication, a declaration to the world of the wonderful doctrine preached in the Gita. Whosoever comes to me, through whatsoever form, I reach him.
That was a strategic blunder. It was the wrong vision. If we live in a global world in which everything is interrelated, in which whatever happens in any region affects other regions and countries, you cannot solve those problems by getting it alone. You need united efforts. Without a doubt, everything will depend on which course the world community will take in addressing the problems that I've described. The future of our planet is at stake. My experience, the experience of a person who has been in politics for 50 years, indicates that we will soon see the beginnings of solutions that will change the course of development for the better, that will improve relations between the human society and the environment. Mankind is now more aware of these problems, and that is what makes me optimistic that the situation will begin to change. But those efforts are still uncoordinated. There is then not concerted acts. I would say that initially there was tremendous hope that after the end of the Cold War, which we announced when we met in Moldova with President Bush, that after the end of the Cold War there will be enormous changes for the better with great expectations, and we adopted very important documents that opened the way to cooperation, that opened the way to interaction for changing the world order and for creating international partnerships. Well, that process slowed down, and the opportunities that we had were not fully used. Very little has been done to seize those opportunities in the international scene that Perestroika opened.
If the seas rose as little as 1 meter, 30 million Bangladeshis would lose their homes if the sea rose by 2 meters. Most climate experts believe that at today's rate of global warming, the seas around Bangladesh and those of the rest of the world will rise by more than 6 meters in our grandchildren's lifetime. If we don't mitigate the climate crisis, Muhammad Yunus's 100-year goal may be washed out, literally, because of our irresponsibility. The atmosphere is warming at a rate not seen for 10,000 years. The 10 warmest years on record have all been since 1990. There's no longer any reasonable doubt human activities are responsible for increasing concentration of greenhouse gases in the Earth's atmosphere. If emissions are not curbed, warming trends will continue. 2003 saw extreme heat waves in Europe, killing approximately 20,000 people, with such episodes set to become the norm within decades. More alarmingly, while current projections suggest that without climate change, there may be 1 billion people at risk from starvation by the middle of the century, with climate change, we are looking at as many as 3 billion people who will suffer the ravages of famine and malnutrition. Think about that. The climate change may contribute directly to a 300% increase in malnutrition, famine, and starvation. It's a moral crisis. Or as Henry David Thoreau said, what is the use of a nice house if you haven't got a tolerable planet to put it on? I think you can understand why the climate crisis is one of the major threats to the health of humanity.
I always have one dream, that is this century, within this century, the world truly become real happy human family. In order to achieve that, we really need a sense of oneness of humanity. I think through education, through more holistic leadership of thinking, I feel, I have confidence, through education, through awareness, I think we can develop oneness, sense of oneness of humanity. That very basis of violence, very basis of war, then no longer that. Then this century can be century of peace, century of non-violence.